Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Anatomy of a Superstar. This is our intro just to kind of describe what you're going to get into this summer and next summer, and just kind of describe what this project is that Adam and I have been working on behind the scenes. And Adam, I did the math. It's been almost a year and a half since we started compiling this list of our players that we're going to have over the next 2 summers, narrowing it down. But I'm excited to do this with you. But why don't you? We did this 2 summers ago in the Anatomy of the Franchise intro, but I want you to give us the brainchild that is the Anatomy of the Superstar and what it kind of comes from.
So the initial idea was from this pair of books that I've read by Jonathan Wilson, a man from Sunderland, football writer over in the UK, and he wrote these books called The Anatomy of England and The Anatomy of Liverpool, and it's like The Anatomy of England, a history in 10 matches, and he chose 10 matches over the course of the English national football team's history that explained them. It's not necessarily the 10 best wins, their 10 worst wins, anything like that, just like 10 matches that can kind of explain, the football team. And I was like, man, that's a really cool idea. I wonder if anybody's ever done that for NBA franchises. And I just kind of thought that for years. And I was like, well, why don't I do that for NBA franchises? And I was like, I started doing this podcast with Mitch, and I was like, well, why don't we do that with NBA franchises? It'd be very hard to obviously write, an entire book about some of these franchises. You could easily do so for some of them. But I was like, let's do it as a podcast series, because it's like, look, this is what we do already. It's, it doesn't require quite as much research and work, quite frankly, as writing an entire book. So I thought this would be a really cool way to do it and talk about it kind of in a more interactive way. And so obviously the last 2 summers, we went through every NBA franchise, all 30 teams, and picked, a certain number of games based on the franchise's history to represent them. And then we watched 3 in full. We talked about them. We broke them down. We had categories and all that stuff. And that was a really fun project. And I'm really glad we stuck with it, went all the way through, finished it. But even as we were starting season 2, I was kind of thinking about what could be next? What could be season 3? I thought the natural next step would be players. I think that's just the NBA fandom has moved from teams to players. A lot of the kids that I coach, not really fans of teams, they're fans of players, and not even kids there's people our age that they absorb sports that way too, right? It's like kind of just follow around their favorite player to wherever he goes. And so I thought, well, this would be, people probably feel even more of a connection with this than they would with the franchises going forward, because you just feel so strong about your favorite player. So that was kind of the initial idea, was like, let's just keep this going, but let's do players instead. So obviously I brought that to you, and you were like, yeah, let's run with it.
And as we are both nerds of the game of the NBA and the history it has, I was so ready for this. And you and I, one of our first conversations early on was, what is our top 25 players in NBA history? And we both agreed it shouldn't be just 1 through 25. It should be sectioned off in certain ways. And that's where we're kind of going with it now. And that's where the next step of our conversation and how we're going to kind of break down some of these players. It's not going to be, this is the number 1 player, this is the number 9 player, this is number 27. We are going to have these players tiered off into different portions, into different sections of where they kind of rank. And Adam, you came up with this tiering system that stems back to 2K. Our love for the sport continues on in video game form. But we brought that tiering system to our top 50, and honestly, behind the scenes to everyone, we have a top 300. That's ridiculous. But why don't you kind of tell us, or kind of describe where the tiering system came in?
Yes, the idea of tiers obviously is especially the way talent is dispersed, and the way kind of when you really think about the real kind of needle movers of any industry, much less sports and basketball in general, right? There's only 5 players on the court. 1 player can have an outsized impact on, what happens, much more so than in say soccer, where there's 11 players in the field. And it's just much harder for 1 player to totally dominate. How you rank these players, it's so circumstantial. It's is it just accomplishments? Is it just stats? Is it just eye tests? Is it just all this stuff? And it's to me, it's not any one of those things. It's all those things kind of combined, and, winning absolutely matters, but it can't be the be all and end all, because it's well, some guys just have much easier chances to win because of the teammates they have around them. It's that's just obviously. But a lot of people don't want to kind of take that kind of nuance into it. I'm so glad. I mean, Austin, I think this way very much. We always have. Him and I have just batted around discussions about all this different stuff for our entire lives, it feels like. it was so nice to kind of, there are like-minded people like us, but I don't meet a ton of them. But you are one of those where it's like, it's not just like, oh, well, this guy has this amount of rings, so he's here, and this guy this, and you just slot him in this just like really basic way without any sort of nuance or thought put into it. And then some people do the whole like, well, winning doesn't matter at all. It's just straight up, regular season statistics. And it's like, okay, well, there's got to be a little more to it than that, right? It's like, these highest leverage games have to matter more than others. And so how do you kind of combine all that stuff? And then we want to do a ton of video search. Like I don't just want to look at a basketball reference page. I want to watch and be like, okay, I actually think this guy could move the needle. Maybe the stats don't show it at times, or maybe a guy whose stats do show it at times. But then when I watch him in kind of the highest leverage situations, he actually doesn't drive winning, So all of that stuff like matters. And to me, a tiering system is just always better than a straight ranking because, the difference in player 17 and 25, we'll say, I mean, I just picked random numbers. Like that may be like nothing, that may be like us kind of grading out a player's career at like one guy at like a 9.5, one guy at a 9.4. It's like the difference in that is so minuscule that like they really belong in the same tier. And given different circumstances, like if you surround them with different types of teammates, you can make the case that like they could be anywhere in there. So let's say we have a tier that has 7 players. The fact that we have a tier with 7 players, we think that you can move the order of those players around and make an argument for all of them, to be at any slot in that ranking. So if we have 7 guys in a tier, and let's say they're just totally out of thin air, random example, they're players 31 through 37, on our list, that we think anybody in that tier could be ranked 31 and could be ranked 37. We don't really think they could go higher, and we don't really think they should go lower. They're just in that tier. And given different circumstances on a different day, they can kind of rise and fall, or different perspective of looking at it. But that's kind of how we do the tier system. So we have tiers, and we named them after 2K like cards essentially. So it's it's the Sapphire, it's the Galaxy Opal. Do you have an order of how we've named it? The black, yeah.
Yeah. So we had so our first one isn't even like a card tier. We just have the Mount Rushmore.
Yes.
We have the Mount Rushmore, followed by Dark Matter, Galaxy Opal, Pink Diamond, Amethyst, Ruby, and that is our top 50 like tiers. And after that, it's just some more rocks and how they're classified in people's eyes.
Could you give how many players are in each tier? Or give the rankings of the players, not the actual players themselves, but yeah, so obviously our Mount Rushmore is 1 through 4, right?
Yes, and then Dark Matter, it caps out our top 10. It's the last 6 guys in there, so it's 5 through 10, and then Galaxy Opal's 11 through 18, Pink Diamond's 19 through 25, Diamond is 26 through 34. Amethyst is this weird small collection of 6 guys, 35 to 40. And then we have the Ruby, which is our 41 through 50. So our final 10 guys to round up the top 50 in. There is a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of nuance. And for example, we have guys like Ray Allen in our top 50. What will piss people off is that we don't have a guy named Allen Iverson in our top 50. We do have the collection of guards in Nash, Kidd, and Frazier, and Walt Frazier, all in the same tier. We also have big men in a tier of like Barkley, in a tier with
Karl
Dirk and Karl Malone. So guys of their same like generation. And so we also have guys like George Mikan and Clyde Drexler in the same tier. So guys of different ilk, guys of different eras, which we have decided, or kind of like to jointly and with other people, we're like, hey, where do you think these guys kind of like tier out? And do you think these guys' careers like have totaled to the same amount? And Adam and I have tried these different analogies over our time together. We tried with a pie. We tried with smoothies. We tried with blenders. And I think we finally came up with the idea that an NBA career is like a Jenga block and a Jenga tower. Is this the analogy we went with, right, Adam?
Yeah, I think that's the best visual. Yeah.
Okay, so a Jenga tower with different sized blocks, different sized or different in each like row is a different number of blocks. Some years it's just one block in there, and it's just because of like the amount of talent or like how that season went. Some years it's 3 blocks and they're all thick and they're substantial and they are a great base and they provide a great like standing for a guy's career. And that's the thing. We think that each season is built on these different sized Jenga blocks. How that year goes, how successful, how talented, or how good you look in each one of these seasons, a Jenga block or a collection of Jenga blocks describe how that year looks for you. If that makes sense. Now, if my analogy sucks, get over it. We've tried it with 14 different ones. The pie didn't work. The blender, we tried to make a blender work, but honestly, we just come back to liking strawberry banana smoothies. But I think at the end of the day, just the taller and the more stable your Jenga tower was the better career you had.
Yes, and I think both of us we struggle to. I think we both, and I'll include Austin in this too, because he helped us with some of this. We all understand like what we're thinking in our each other's mind. Like it makes sense to us, like what we're saying. Like okay, we got to use a real life player. I think this is going to help. Jalen Brunson. Let's use Jalen Brunson. Recently, kind of been in the news. Obviously, amazing finals performance. Especially in Game 5, it was incredible. Won the title. Has just had awesome playoff moments here for the last 4 years. A great player. A player I admire and love. And let's talk about a guy who is a big influence on us, and we've obviously read his book and listened to his podcast, and he loves basketball history and talks about it in an accessible way that's like I think made basketball history more interesting to a lot of people who wouldn't have normally thought about it. And Bill Simmons. Bill Simmons has recently talked about how he's got Jalen Brunson in his top 50, and I understand what he's saying. I understand like the case and all this stuff, and I'm disappointed in like him doing that, because like you read the book of basketball, and I actually think that person who wrote that book would have been kind of disappointed in the amount of kind of recency bias he is showing in putting a guy like Jalen Brunson in the top 50, who, let's just be frank, has had 4 really awesome seasons and 2 decent ones in Dallas, right? Like pretty good ones in Dallas, and then 2 like really like kind of subpar seasons when you compare it to like other like all-star level, high level player. So it's like this guy's only played 8 seasons and total. He's had 4 really good ones, 1 amazing one right here, but he's never been first team All-NBA. Nobody has ever really thought of him as like a top 5 player in the league, and he's just automatically, just because of this one title, just kind of removing any nuance, things like that, you're just in the top 50. It's right. Like, man, by that logic, like Jaylen Brown needs to be in the top 50. Jason Tatum should be in the top 50, right? Because they've played longer, have had more super high quality seasons, and led their team to a title. But they're not. So it's like there's this huge inconsistency with even like very like prominent figures to talk about basketball history. I think you and I want to remain consistent and like fair, and I think we definitely lean longevity. I think you, me, and Austin all do. We lean longevity. However, there are examples of like, because I think some people will listen to this and they'll just be like, well, like your Jenga tower analogy. The premise to me is this: every time a player plays an NBA season, he gets a block to add to his Jenga tower. Now, a season where you only play like let's take Kawhi's 2018 season, where we barely played. He played like 6 games. You get a block, but it's like extremely thin. It's like this very
your
small
blocks are different sizes, or you add a few blocks. Like for Brunson this year, I almost think of it as like you had a great season and then you won a title. You get a few blocks, like you're adding blocks.
Or it's a really big block, right? It's like that's just like really big block you get to put on your thing. Like so, every season you play, you're just adding like all you can do is add that one block. That's all you can do. Now sometimes it's a huge block, right? Like 2013 LeBron, it's like, well, that's a massive block. Like that's just like this. You just stack it on this thing. And but like 2018 Kawhi, it's very thin, right? You don't get credit. Like you didn't play, like you didn't accomplish it. You didn't do anything. Like you didn't add anything to your legacy. So and people do this whole like, well, Chris Paul, the one time he made the finals, they lost. Like that season only added to Chris Paul's legacy. How could it possibly take away? Like he played really well and his team made the finals. Like how could that possibly take away? That's insane to me. So I think just the way we talk about basketball and like kind of rank these players like needs a real overhaul. And this is kind of our attempt to help like the discourse. I think what people are going to find with our list and tiers and things like that is like we're probably a bit slower to like, we don't do any projecting. It is straight up like it's as if their career ended right now, like today. Correct. The day we're doing the rankings. So there is no projection at all. So like there's no like we do not have like a like Wemby would never make a list like this, even though he's just had an amazing season. It's like it's just he's not even close. Like you need to put together like a massive like resume before you can be on a list like this. So I think Ray Allen, who you mentioned already, is a really good example of a player who okay, his peak is not as high as Jalen Brunson. No doubt about it. Like, I think what Jalen Brunson did this year is kind of just, he gets a bigger block, right? Jalen Brunson's 2026 than any season Ray Allen had. But Ray Allen has like 12 to 15 really high quality seasons. Like, and you just keep, so his Jenga tower, every time he plays one of those seasons, is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so I'm looking at it as like, well, this tower is just a lot taller than the Jalen Brunson one. Now, Jalen Brunson, if he continues, will be taller, right? Because like he's going to keep adding really big blocks, but he hasn't done it yet. And what if he tears his ACL next year and doesn't play? What, like, we don't know what a guy's career is going to hold. So we are doing zero projections. It is straight up like, what have you done today? And so is that going to favor players from the past? It is, unfortunately. And it's not a who's better. I think it's a huge distinction to make. I think Jalen Brunson is a better player than who's somebody we have, Kevin McHale. Like he's more skilled. He's got all these different things he can do with the ball. Like I understand, like intuitively, like basketball gets better with time, but all a player can do is play in his time. So we only judge what did you do against your peers and like who was more impressive in their time. It's not a science fiction project where it's like, well, if you moved him here and you moved him here and did this, all this little, like, no, it's all we can do is kind of judge them in the time that they played. And so who was the most dominant, who did the most in the time that they played. And so I still would have Kevin McHale ahead of Jalen Brunson all time because there's just so much more to it. But it's not just more, because then someone could be like, well, like, then why isn't like, who's like Kevin Willis, who played 20 years, well, why isn't he, top 50? It's like, okay, but Kevin Willis has a lot of seasons that he got really small blocks, so it's like, it just doesn't stack up as high. So it's not just a straight up like, well, more equals better. That's not what it is. It's like, it's a combination of the two. It's like a stacking of all these great seasons, which is why LeBron, it's like, there's just this point where it's like, well, this is just absurd. This tower just keeps going. It just doesn't stop because he just keeps stacking these just amazing seasons on top of each other. And so therefore, that's how he's easily in this Mount Rushmore that we have. So does that make sense? I think, am I explaining that well?
Yeah, you are. And I think one thing just to harp on here too is, listen, we understand that this era of the NBA is the most talented.
No question.
Every
Not even
player.
close.
Correct. What we are basing this off of as well is just impact and era. And I think that's how we can kind of like, whether you want to base it off of all NBA or whether won titles. Again, we've talked about this. It is a culmination of everything. It's stats, it's eye test, it is accomplishments all wrapped up into one. And that's how we're kind of basing it off. And of course, you're going to have guys like George Mikan who played a short amount of seasons, but the guy was just a constant winner. The guy only won in his era and was an amazing impact and in growing the sport, as well as just being a constant, just the best player in his era at that point.
Right.
So,
and I think I'm actually really glad you said George Mikan because we've also taken into account era and like, yes, it was easier to win in that era. There were less teams, right? Like, I mean, Mikan, there wasn't even a shot clock for the majority of his career. So it's like, of course, like we're not going to weigh, a great season in that period the same as a great season in 1997. Like we're just not. It's like it's harder to do later, yes, but that doesn't mean you just throw that out. Like that is a huge part of NBA history, and he did dominate. That's all he can do. He couldn't do anything differently. Like there's one thing I don't really like that we've done, recently, with just kind of like the way people talk about basketball. Is like if he played in this era, this, or if he did this, or like this guy could translate to any era. It's like, that's a cool like thought experiment, but that's not to me a reason why a player should be higher or lower, like on an all-time list. Because when I'm training players or coaching players, I'm not like telling them like, all I'm doing is taking advantage of like the rules and the way the game's being played right now. So right now you are allowed to kind of put your hand on the side of the ball and kind of do these different moves and kind of hesitate and hold it. Like I'm not thinking like, what, actually, I probably shouldn't teach you that because, I want your game to be able to translate to any era of basketball history. It's like, no, that's crazy. Like no one's doing that. So no one in 1980 is thinking like, you know what? I better actually train you differently because I feel like a 3-point revolution is coming and this is just going to kind of explode the game. It's like, no, that's not Moses Malone's fault. That's how the game was played when he played, like, so I'm not going to do this like punishment of different eras either direction, right? There's some basketball history people who like shit on the current players because they're so obsessed with the past and they think like everything now sucks and everything in the past was great. I don't think either one of us do that. I think we're very fair to every era. And to me, the second an NBA game ends, that's NBA history, just like a game from 1965. right? There's different contexts, and you can add context to it and think about it and like be smart and nuanced about it. But it's all NBA history, right? We've made this point before. Michael Jordan's prime, the kind of 88 to 93 range, is closer to Bill Russell's era than it is to today. And people don't like to deal with that, right? They just have these like magical cutoff points. We just don't do that. Everything is history. Everything's on the table. We're going to gather it all. We're going to take in all the information. We're going to be fair to every era. And I really love that you think this way too, because in my mind, it's the only way to do it. Or else you're just going to like draw these imaginary lines and have these cutoffs and move the goalposts constantly. And I don't think that's fair.
Nor do I. And I think we've done a great job of like judging eras. Like we have had multiple conversations about what are the strongest eras of basketball, weakest eras of basketball, and the generations that have kind of come with it. And we've been, again, this has been a 1.5-year project. This has not been taken lightly. This has been something we've been doing constantly in the background. Mm-hmm. Has it pissed off significant others between the two of us? Probably. Have they been slightly annoyed with our infatuation with the sport of and the history of the sport of basketball? Quite possibly. However, do they respect it? Maybe not. That being said, it is something we both care about a lot. And I think we're going to get into this, and I hope and like you said early on, the evolution of the NBA fandom has become players and like being a fan of a player. And I think it starts with the 21st century and like the shift in the 21st century. There's a few players I think that kind of led that, and we'll get into them. But I also want to say this: how we're doing our order for these episodes. It is a random order. It is not like we're doing all the Mount Rushmores to start. No, we also decided we're only going to do 2 Mount Rushmores this summer and 2 Mount Rushmores next summer. You're not going to know when. You're not going to know until the next episode. What we will tell you now is that there will be 25 this summer from this top 50 and 25 next summer from the top 50. We kind of try to do an even split of young guys, or more recent guys to older guys. We try to do a lot of 80s and 90s mixture throughout it all. We try to have a little fun with it, trying to make teammates like Karl Malone and John Stockton in the same summer. We tried to have a little fun with like doing some rival guys who were rivals with one another, like Hakeem and David Robinson. And so we tried to have a little fun with it each summer. But that being said, there are 4 guys who are in our Mount Rushmore. 2 of them will be this summer. 2 of them will be next summer. And Adam, I don't know if there's anything else you want to get into before we announce our first player, but I just want to clarify if there's anything you want to touch on before we announce who we're doing on Friday.
Yeah, very cool. I guess it was random, but also we did we did put a lot of thought into it in the order of the releasing. And so it's like slightly random, but we didn't want to run of 90s players. We didn't want to run of 60s players. Like we did want to sprinkle in all these different guys and have different eras and in positions and stuff like that too. Plus like the games, right? It's like we want to watch games from different time periods and kind of jump around and all that stuff. So I'm wearing this hat for a reason. Anybody who's watching this on video, it's the NBA at 50 hat that they released in 1997, the 50 greatest players. There are a bunch of guys who are on that list who are not on our top 50 because obviously a lot has happened in the NBA since then, and we even think there were some wrongs at that point with how they ranked some of those 50 players. So no, let's go ahead and announce the first guy because I think that we're starting with a bang here.
Well, yeah, and I think we'll start right now with a controversial one. It's a guy that, man, some people would have in their Mount Rushmore, and we do not. And Adam, we don't even have him in the top 10. But we'll get into that a little bit more as we do our episode on Friday. Our first player is going to be Kobe Bryant, a player who has defined the 21st century NBA fan. And I think, in my mind, while he played for one team his entire career, was the catalyst into a player fan, like a fan of a player. Like guys worshipped Kobe Bryant. And I think there are players who have modeled their game after Kobe, who modeled his game after MJ. And we'll get into that a little bit more on Friday. We bring in our buddy Carl Baltimore, who's going to help us just break down Kobe. And it might get controversial, but this is what we wanted to start with. We want to start with a bang. And we wanted to get it out there for everybody. So it's going to come out on Friday. You can listen to it. And that's the other thing too, Adam, was we try to make this like evergreen content like we do with Anatomy of a Franchise. I think one of the things that I love is the fact that we're getting still listens to last summer's or the past 2 summers pods. I mean, our Chicago Bulls episode continues to get listens all the time from our friends in Europe, which is great. Thank you, Finnish people who have been listening recently. But that's what we're aiming to do for this content over the next 2 summers, is create content for people who want to just go back and listen to us talk about who their favorite players are growing up or from the past.
Yeah, and obviously it's going to be such a fun one to start with, and a guy that's just endlessly fascinating and so fun to talk about, and there's just so many different routes you can go, and obviously played in a bunch of great games, and we'll watch some really fun games of him. And again, we're going to try to steer away from here's why he's not this, and it's but we will explain kind of hey, here's the tier he's in, and here's kind of a little bit why, and we'll get into that more on the actual Kobe episode, but. Yeah, a great one to start with. We actually picked this pretty early. We were like, let's start with Kobe. That was kind of one of the first. It's just again such a fun guy to talk about. And just you cannot tell the story of the NBA without Kobe Bryant. And so I think that's just going to be a perfect guy to start with. And yeah, we like you said, we will announce the next player at the end of each episode. So we'll finish the Kobe episode and we'll tell you who the next player is going to be.
Yep. So it's gonna be a blast. We are very excited to start that this week. This is the intro for it, of course, and so. The schedule for it will be we'll do one on Tuesday and one on Friday, kind of like what we did with Anatomy of a Franchise. So this is your Tuesday episode. Get ready for Friday. Thanks everyone for listening, and we are super excited to start Anatomy of a Superstar.